Hey everyone, welcome back to another deep dive.
Excited to be here.
We've been spending a lot of time with Paul lately,
Yeah,
really digging into his letters.
definitely.
But today we're going to kind of take a little detour.
Ooh, a detour.
Yeah, we're going to shift gears a little bit and look at the book of James.
Interesting.
And, with Paul, it's all about faith in Jesus' sacrifice, right? That's the heart of salvation.
Yeah, for sure.
But James seems to bring something else into the mix.
He does, doesn't he? It's like he's saying, hold on a sec, there's more to it than just believing.
Exactly. He really emphasizes the importance of deeds right alongside faith.
Yes. Faith without works is dead. That's a pretty powerful statement right there.
It is. And it kind of makes you wonder, are they talking about totally different kinds of faith?
Right, like are we on the same page here?
Because James doesn't really come right out and define what he means by faith, does he?
No, not directly. He addresses his letter to the 12 tribes scattered among the nations and refers to Jesus as Lord.
Okay, so we're definitely in a Christian context.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
But the focus is much more on how that faith shows up in our everyday lives.
And he gets pretty specific, too, like
Mhm.
in James 2.1417,
Oh, yeah.
where he talks about seeing a brother or sister in need.
Right. It's like he's saying, what's the point of just talking the talk if you're not walking the walk?
Yeah. Like offering empty words and well wishes when someone's actually struggling.
Exactly. It's like wishing someone good luck, stay warm, have a nice day when they don't have food or shelter.
Totally meaningless. James is really driving home the point that true faith isn't just a head thing.
It's about putting your beliefs into action, showing your faith through what you do.
And he uses a pretty powerful example to make his point.
Let me guess, Abraham.
You got it? The story of Abraham being willing to sacrifice his son Isaac.
Oh, yeah. The ultimate test of faith.
Exactly. And James points to that story in chapter 2 to illustrate his point.
He reminds us that Abraham wasn't considered righteous simply because he believed in God.
It was his willingness to act on that belief, to actually do what God asked, that really proved his faith.
Right. Faith and action going hand in hand.
So where does this leave Paul?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it?
Because Paul's whole message seems to revolve around faith in Christ's sacrifice as the key to salvation.
Right. That's the foundation of his teaching.
And these two ideas, they seem to clash, don't they?
Well, on the surface, it might appear that way.
Like, are Paul and James on totally different wavelengths here?
It's easy to read these passages and think, wait a minute, are these guys even talking about the same thing?
So how do we reconcile these seemingly opposing viewpoints?
Well, maybe instead of a contradiction, we're looking at two sides of the same coin.
Ooh, I like that. Two sides of the same coin.
So think about it this way. Paul focuses on the foundation, believing in Jesus as the cornerstone of salvation.
That's the essential starting point.
Exactly. But then James comes along and takes it a step further.
He explores what naturally grows from that genuine faith.
A life transformed by good works.
It's like that line in James 1.22. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says.
Yes, don't just be a hearer of the word, be a doer.
He's not letting us off the hook with passive belief.
No way. He wants to see that faith lived out actively in our everyday lives.
And that's where James really shines.
He gets down to the nitty-gritty of everyday life.
He tackles real-world struggles that early Christians face.
Struggles that we still face today, actually.
Absolutely. How to deal with trials, how to treat each other, how to live out your faith in a world that doesn't always share your values.
It's a timeless message, really.
And he doesn't shy away from giving specific advice either.
No, he doesn't. He talks about taming the tongue, resisting worldly temptations, persevering through tough times.
I was particularly struck by his discussion of favoritism.
Oh, yeah.
It felt so relevant even today.
Absolutely.
Right.
Like that scenario he describes where a rich person gets preferential treatment while a poor person is ignored or marginalized.
Yeah. Sadly, that still happens all the time.
It's like he's holding up a mirror to society and saying, look, this is what happens when you prioritize wealth and status over people.
And he's not afraid to call out hypocrisy either, especially within the church.
He's challenging us to live out our faith authentically, treating everyone with the same respect and dignity.
Regardless of their background or social standing.
Exactly. That's a powerful reminder for all of us.
It really is. And it makes me want to dig deeper into some of the specific examples of deeds that James highlights.
Yeah. Let's explore how he sees this idea of faith in action playing out in the lives of early Christians.
I'm ready when you are.
So one area that James really zeroes in on is the power of our words.
Yeah, he has some pretty strong words about words.
He does, like when he talks about the tongue being A restless evil full of deadly poison.
Whoa, that's intense. But you know it's so true.
It really is. Think about it.
How quickly rumors and negativity can spread.
Even in groups that are supposed to be close-knit.
Like he's saying, watch out. Your words can do serious damage.
Exactly. And it's not just about the big things either.
It's the little things, too.
Yeah.
The snide remarks, the gossip, the careless words we throw around.
All of it can have a ripple effect.
And it's not just an issue for early Christians.
Nope. It's something we all struggle with.
This is like universal wisdom here.
Absolutely. The way we use our words, it has a huge impact on ourselves and those around us.
So how do we tame this restless evil?
Well, James urges us to be mindful of our speech.
To think before we speak, basically.
Yeah. And to use our words for good, you know?
To build others up.
To speak truth and love.
To create harmony instead of discord.
That's the goal.
So taming the tongue, that's one key deed.
One way to put our faith into action.
What else does James highlight?
Well, he also talks a lot about perseverance.
Especially when we're going through tough times.
Exactly. Trials, temptations, setbacks, you name it.
And he actually encourages his readers to consider it pure joy when they face trials.
I know, right? Sounds kind of crazy.
Pure joy. Who actually feels that way when things are falling apart?
But he's coming at it from a different angle.
Like a spiritual growth kind of angle.
Exactly. He sees trials as opportunities to grow stronger in our faith.
To develop resilience.
To learn to rely on God.
It's like that saying, the strongest steel is forged in the hottest fire.
Yeah. Our faith can actually become more resilient when it's tested.
It's like a muscle that gets stronger when you work it out.
Exactly. And during those tough times, James reminds us that God is there for us.
That he's faithful and will never leave us.
That's a powerful promise to hold on to.
So perseverance, that's another key deed.
Another way to put our faith into action.
What about those worldly temptations that James warns against?
Well, he's particularly concerned with the pursuit of wealth and status.
Because those things can be so seductive.
They can, but James reminds us that they're ultimately fleeting.
Meaningless in the grand scheme of things.
Exactly. He even goes so far as to say that friendship with the world is like enmity against God.
Whoa. That's pretty strong language.
It is. It's like he's saying you can't serve two masters.
You have to choose where your loyalty lies.
With God or with the values of the world.
And that choice will be reflected in your actions.
Absolutely. He's calling us to examine our hearts.
To make sure our desires and ambitions are aligned with our faith.
Are we chasing after temporary things or eternal ones?
That's the question we all need to ask ourselves.
And it's closely tied to that whole issue of favoritism that we talked about earlier.
Because the pursuit of wealth and status can so easily lead to that kind of behavior.
Right. When we prioritize those things, it's easy to start judging others based on their outward appearances.
Either financial success.
Exactly. And that's the opposite of what James is calling us to do.
He wants us to see beyond the surface.
To recognize the inherent worth and dignity of every person.
Regardless of their background or social standing.
Because true wealth isn't measured in dollars and cents.
It's about our relationship with God and how we treat others.
And that brings us to another important theme in James.
Community.
Yes. For James, the Christian life isn't a solo journey.
It's about walking alongside each other, supporting each other through thick and thin.
We need each other, especially when we're going through tough times.
And James encourages this sense of community through practical actions.
Like praying for each other.
Confessing our sins to each other.
Offering tangible help to those who are struggling.
You know, this reminds me of something that has always fascinated me about James.
What's that?
He doesn't just talk about prayer in a general sense.
Right.
He actually gives specific instructions on how and when to pray.
You're thinking of the section on praying for healing.
Exactly. In James 5.1316, where he tells those who are sick to call on the elders of the church.
To pray for them and anoint them with oil.
It's such a powerful picture of communal care and support.
It really is. And it highlights the belief that prayer can bring about real healing.
He even uses the example of Elijah the prophet.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
In James 5.1718.
To illustrate the impact of prayer.
Elijah was a man just like us.
And yet, through his fervent prayer, he was able to bring about a drought and then end it.
It's a powerful reminder that our prayers can have a real impact on the world around us.
So we've got taming the tongue, perseverance, resisting worldly temptations, caring for the poor and marginalized, and the power of prayer and community.
That's quite a list.
It really paints a picture of what James means by faith in action, doesn't it?
It does. It all comes back to that central idea that true faith isn't just about believing the right things.
It's about living out those beliefs in tangible, practical ways.
It's about aligning our actions with our words, our values, and our deepest convictions.
And that's a challenge that each of us has to wrestle with.
Absolutely. How do we ensure that our lives reflect what we claim to believe?
How do we bridge the gap between faith and works?
That's the question we all need to ask ourselves. Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? How do we take these ancient teachings and apply them to our lives today?
It's like James is holding up a mirror and saying, take a good look. Are you really living out your faith? Or are you just talking a good game?
He's definitely challenging us to go deeper than just surface level belief.
To really examine our hearts and our actions.
And I think one of the key themes that runs throughout his letter is this idea of humility.
Humility.
Yeah. He talks a lot about humbling ourselves before God.
Resisting pride and arrogance.
Exactly. Why do you think that's so important to him?
Well, I think it's because humility allows us to recognize our need for God.
Yes. When we're full of ourselves, when we think we've got it all figured out,
We tend to rely on our own strength,
our own wisdom,
our own
and
understanding.
we end up cutting ourselves off from God's grace.
It's like we build these walls around ourselves.
And those walls, they can keep us from experiencing the fullness of God's love.
And from receiving the support of our community.
But humility, it breaks down those walls.
It allows us to admit that we don't have all the answers.
To ask for help when we need it.
To lean on God and on each other.
And that's where true strength comes from.
Not from our own efforts, but from surrendering to God's power working within us.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
And it reminds me of that powerful verse in James. God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble.
It's a stark reminder that our attitude matters.
It's not just about what we do, but also about the heart behind our actions,
And I think that message of humility is so countercultural, especially in today's world.
where it's all about self-promotion and individual achievement,
James is calling us to something different.
to a life of service and selflessness,
To recognize that we're all part of something bigger than ourselves.
and that our lives are meant to be lived in service to God and to others.
And that service, it can take so many different forms.
It might involve volunteering in our community,
Speaking out against injustice,
offering a listening ear to a friend who's going through a tough time.
or just simply extending kindness and compassion to those we encounter in our everyday lives.
It's about putting our faith into action in practical ways that make a difference in the world.
And it's not always easy.
James acknowledges that there will be challenges and setbacks along the way.
But he encourages us to keep striving, to keep pressing on.
To align our actions with our beliefs, and to trust that God is working all things together for good.
It's a message of hope and resilience.
A call to live out our faith in a way that honors God and transforms the world around us.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the book of James,
I think the big question we're left with is this.
if faith without works is dead,
What deeds are we being called to in our own lives?
what steps can we take to bridge the gap between what we believe and how we live?
It's a question that each of us needs to wrestle with.
And one that can lead us to a deeper, more authentic expression of our faith.
So to all you deep divers out there,
Thanks for joining us on this journey through the book of James,
we hope it's challenged you to think differently about what it means to live a life of faith.
and to consider how you can put your beliefs into action in your own unique way.
We'll be back next week to continue our exploration of early Christianity. Until then, keep diving deep.